Good evening. Welcome to the February 23rd meeting of the Lake Forest Historic Preservation Commission. The commission is here tonight to work together with all of you, property owners, neighbors, and architects to continue the tradition that was established nearly 40 years ago in this community. That tradition is a review process that allows community members to work together to preserve the qualities and unique character that make Lake Forest a special community. City of Lake Forest is committed to conducting open and democratic meetings, and to achieve that goal, meeting procedures have been adopted by the commission. A copy of the procedures is available at the back of the room on each agenda. It's always the intent of the commission to help manage the development and growth of the city of Lake Forest with a keen sense of preserving the historic structures and open space in the city for all its present and future residents. Our goal is to move each petition before us tonight through the review process as quickly as possible while balancing the interest of the petitioners, neighboring property owners, and the larger community. Now we're going to start with an introduction of the commissioners.
Mary Ellen Swenson.
Virginia McTier.
Guy Berg.
Kurt Pairitz.
Fred Moyer.
Bill Ransom.
Jim Preschlag.
And our staff.
Megan O'Neill.
Kathy Cernia. Just a reminder to make sure your microphones are on. And
Is mine not on?
I think you might be having some technical difficulties.
All right. All right, we do not have meeting minutes for January, so we'll table that till next month. And I think our first order of business tonight is consent agenda. 2 items on the consent agenda. And so I'll ask if any of the commissioners have any questions or comments with respect to either one of them. Otherwise, we'll move directly to a motion. And seeing no questions or comments, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner McTier and seconded by Commissioner Moyer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That motion passes. All right, we have a first order of business beyond the consent agenda for the continued petition on more signage for Elawa Farms.
Good evening. I'm Paul Bergman. Am I here to talk about Stanley Anderson tonight, or am I here to talk about something else?
We're wondering how many sides you could possibly have.
Actually, I'm only wearing 2 hats. We are once again before you to talk about the signage at Elawa Farm. I have brought our sample sign here again in case any of you haven't seen it, but this is the small size sign that we're going to be using inside the buildings, and if anybody would like to see it, wait, I'll bring it up if you'd like. So.
Want me to go get it?
That's not full size, right, Paul?
It's full size for the interiors of the buildings, for the interior signage. The exterior sign is going to be 4 feet tall and 3.5 feet wide. Let's see if I'm going to have to put my glasses on here to use your... you can see from the slide that we have up here, you can see what the original sign looked like when it was hanging on the pole, on the light pole out at Elawa Farm. This is taken from the Armour Family Home Movies. These are screenshots from 1939 and 1940. So this is what was hanging out there originally, and this is what we've been working so hard on trying to replace. We've had a graphic artist take the slide that you see on the right and literally electronically trace that into his computer, and then had an engineer then further refine that and electronically trace that into CAD/CAM so that we could then have that cut and manufactured. The sign that I'm passing around that you're looking at is the sign that's made out of cut aluminum. The sign that we're going to be installing is going to be made out of stainless steel. And which button do I see? I'm trying to figure out which button I have to pass here to make this go forward. So Okay, so our proposal is to, we're going to install a pole that's 4 inches in diameter. It's round, it's a standard pole. There's a picture of the finial that you'll see. By getting a 17-foot-long pole and putting 4 feet in the ground, the very top of the pole will stand 13 feet. And then moving on to the next sign, here is the engineer's version of the sign, and the material is going to be made out of 1/4-inch thick stainless steel. Now, the sign that you're handing around is made out of aluminum, and it's quite a bit lighter than what we're going to be doing in doing this in stainless steel. The reason for doing it in stainless steel and then painting it is that the metal will not deteriorate, and the stainless steel will absorb the powder coating, and the paint won't come off. So this is essentially the most durable way we can figure out how to build this sign. And essentially, there is no cost differential between making it out of a thinner piece of stainless steel or a thicker piece of aluminum. So we ended up with kind of a wash on the pricing. And then we're going to have letters cut out of the same metal, and then those will be welded onto the sign. And then those will be painted white. The letters will be welded onto both sides of the sign. So, then we get into the brackets. We have had brackets designed to mount to the pole. The machine shop that is building the sign for us is also custom manufacturing the brackets for us. We went through considerable analysis of the original sign to try and figure out how they bolted the sign to their pole, and ultimately ended up having to build our own brackets from scratch. I can show you each of the brackets here. The lower bracket, again, this is made out of 1/8-inch thick stainless steel. It has a much longer tail or wing on it that extends into the depth of the sign, and that's designed to help stop or slow down any flapping in the wind, to give it a little bit more rigidity. We don't think that the sign is going to kite very much because there's a lot of open space. There's a lot of material that's been cut out of the sign, but it's still, in the wintertime, it gets quite windy out on Waukegan Road. So we are trying to take that into consideration. And then the upper bracket here is, again, 1/8-inch stainless steel and pretty much the same design. This is what Waukegan Road looks like at the moment. You can see the city-installed sign, and below it are the 2 or 3 other signs, Wildlife Discovery sign, and then I think the next one is perhaps open lands hanging below that. And then through the wonders of Photoshop, this is what we think this is going to look like when it's completed, so that sign will once again regain its sort of prominence on Waukegan Road and will be easily visible by anybody coming along. As I mentioned, it's 4 feet tall, 3.5 feet wide, and we think it's going to be just a wonderfully dramatic sign to have hanging out there on the road. We're going to hang a second sign. Once you enter and come down to the farm, we're going to replace the other city-installed sign here with the same sign setup, sticking out of the ground by 13 feet, same 4 feet by 3.5 foot sign. Hanging here in just about or exactly the same spot as the current sign is standing. So those are my comments, and I'll take any questions that you might have. So,
Do you have any questions or comments?
I just want one question. On one side of your sign it's white, and the other side it's beige for Elawa Farms.
yes, that is an interior sign, and we are color testing whether we wanted to use a pure blank white, or we wanted to come closer to matching the sort of creamy beige color that the farm buildings are painted. And by general consensus, everybody has said that they like the beige color that sort of matches the, it isn't a complete match, but it comes closer to matching the signs that are, matching the paint that's out there on the buildings now. So,
I think Megan actually has a little staff follow-up for us, so I'll let you do that if you want to do that.
Thank you, Chairman Pairitz. members of the commission. As you know, Elawa Farm is working on an overall signage plan for the facility. Elawa Farm was designated as a local landmark, I believe last year. So far, the commission has reviewed signage requests for the kiosk sign that you may have seen if you drove out to the property this past weekend, the building and identification sign and directional signs, and this is really the final piece of the signage plan for Elawa Farm. Initially, when the commission first came forward to when the Elawa Farm Foundation came forward to the commission for a conceptual signage plan, the Waukegan Road sign was really a lot more than what you see proposed today. And that modification is really based on input that the commission gave at that time to try to preserve the residential character of that entrance into Middlefork while still providing a historic symbol for Elawa Farm and identifying where the farm is located for people driving along Waukegan Road. I think that sign is actually consistent with the discussion that the commission has had on this signage plan so far. The sign at Elawa Farm is consistent as well with the conceptual plan that the commission saw prior to today. And as Paul mentioned, it will be replacing the signs that are out there today in both locations. So the signs that you see there right now will be gone, replaced with these two simple historic Elawa Farm signs. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Terrific looking stuff. I think, Jim, do you have a question?
Well, I was just curious, Paul, who was the first designer on the sign, or do you know the history of the sign? Because it's very unique.
The original designer is lost to history. What's interesting about watching the Armour family home movies is that there's a whole series of signs that are like this that are made out of cut steel. So there's a Friends of Elawa, Please Park Here sign that's in many ways it's equally as cute as this sign. And then there's another sign that says Elawa Gardens on it that again has a cutout of many different kinds of flowers. There's very tall hollyhocks in that and whatnot. In a perfect world, we'd like to reproduce all of the signs. This has been a very long, very labor-intensive process, so I don't know that we're going to be able to complete the other signs. It would sure be fun to do it. I don't know we're going to be able to get there. So.
Question, the stainless steel brackets, I would presume they're going to have the same powder coat finish as the sign itself.
Yes, everything, all of the pole, the brackets, the sign will all be black, except for the white lettering.
Do you know how the diameter of the pole that's out there now, is the pole that's out there now wider than 4 inches? We're looking at the photograph and
The pole that's out there now, that's holding up the City of Lake Forest sign, the City of Lake Forest sign, having just driven past it, I'm going to estimate that it's 3 inches square, and it's square stock rather than round stock. This is actually, the pole that we're purchasing is actually a flagpole. So we've gone to a flagpole company for this.
Guy and I are just sketching on top of your Photoshop drawing. So now we've got old technology on top of new technology, and wondering whether it's actually too narrow. It's the Photoshop. If you show that Photoshop again, actually, it'd be great. I don't know if you can, but it's okay if you can't.
The sign is just great, Paul.
If you give us something to criticize, we will find something.
Sure. All right.
One more.
Well, you ought to see some of the photographs that we're getting back from the machine
Yeah.
shop
That
guys.
So the pole, it looks like it's quite stout there, actually, and wondering if it really will look that way.
Okay, Guy, you're there with the pencil in hand. The sign is 3.5, the sign is 3.5 feet wide. You want to try and figure out if my graphic artist got the width of the
Well, you
pole
know,
right?
the thing is that I like it so darn much, the sign's going to be just smashing as can be, and I'm just wondering if it's really bigger than 4 inches in that figure, because I tend to not trust these renderings for specificities like an inch or here or there.
You know, our graphic artist,
This is the one that was there.
Yeah,
That's there now.
I know, a second
And
ago,
then if you
I
go to
mean,
the next one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it doesn't look any bigger,
Well,
honestly.
I guess, this is what I think you might want to do, because I like this so much, and I don't want to hold you guys up, but it might be worth having the guy draw the sign with the pole at 4 inches, and you guys can actually look at it, rather than trust him to come out with it and then have somebody get disappointed over the fact that it's not a little bit bigger.
Actually, we've come at it from the engineering standpoint of asking the flagpole company, if we're going to hang a sign 13 feet in the air and we think it's going to weigh 50 or 60 pounds, how does that translate into the flagpole company putting a great big flag up there, and what happens to all of the wind currents and things like that and stuff? And so
I
they
think
can-
Guy's point is that you might want it heavier than it structurally needs to be, just for looks.
Right. The
Yeah.
flagpole.
It's an aesthetic concern that I'm just trying to help you guys so that you don't put it up and unfortunately have that sunken feeling that comes from not actually checking a little more.
Yeah.
And maybe you might ask them for a
I
drawing.
can ask our graphic artist to do that. I can try and ask our graphic artist to do that, but we'll see how it comes together. I don't know that we have many options in downsizing the diameter of the pole.
No, I
think-
don't mean downsize the pole. I think maybe that might be bigger than 4 inches. You might want it a little bigger, that's all. I just think it's going to look so great out there, though. I'm really excited.
If the pole turns out to be a little narrow, a little thinner than the drawing, than the photo that we're looking at, it's going to be just even more fabulous. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not so sure, actually. I think that's the criticism, is we like the proportions of that pole to that sign. And
You like
so
the
if
stoutness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's nice. I mean, it doesn't look like it's up in the air with nothing holding it up. It looks like it's, secure to the ground and has an appropriately sized structure holding it up.
Joanne,
And if
can you
it's-
back up to the original photograph of the hanging on the street pole?
Do you guys know what size those poles are? That the city uses? No?
No, back up all the way to the ancient
Oh.
one, the original one. So,
There we
Oh,
go.
yeah. See, so that's a bigger than 3-inch pole, because it's holding up a light. That's probably a 5.5-inch pole at the base, right, tapering to 3 at the very top.
okay.
And so that's the issue, is that we wouldn't want the pole to look too light.
Too thin.
It doesn't want to be an
How big is the
aerial with a
sign?
pendant on it. It wants to be
Paul, this isn't how you play the game.
it's not rocket science. We just want you to check
Same
it.
size as the original.
We'll be happy to.
It's just a hint. Might want to check.
It's a
4 feet
suggestion.
by 3.5
Do we
inches.
have any, oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, before that came up, whether the pole that's being proposed is a tapered pole or a standard dimension, constant dimension 4-inch.
It's my understanding it's a standard, just a straight pole, it's not tapered.
Because I was going to suggest you consider a tapered pole, and that's what we see in this older picture. And as a source for that, you might consider not only flagpoles, but look at the lamp standards that outdoor lighting people make, because they do tapered poles, and they also can provide it with fluting, which might be also something to consider here, because it gives it a little bit more of a vintage character than does a plain, smooth
Okay.
pole.
Okay, so we have an opportunity for public testimony, if there is any on this, and if there's not, then we have an opportunity to deliberate. Any public testimony, please? Please come up and introduce yourself if you would. Thanks.
I'm Craig Bergman. I have a house in Elawa Farm. I was just wondering if the sign was going to be lit.
No, we don't. There are no plans to light the sign at the moment. There's traffic lights there, and I don't think there's any street lights there, but there are traffic lights there, so it will have some sort of ambient lighting. It will turn from red to green to yellow on a regular basis.
All right, any other deliberations from our staff or our commissioners? So I think, we love this stuff. We've seen this a couple of different times. This is a great sign, and, all of the signage we've been really happy about that you folks have put together. So it's terrific stuff. I think Guy's got an interesting detail for you to look at, and I would suggest that in a motion that we let staff work with the presenters on that detail, but I think it's worth comparing your options on the pole, and a little heavier pole than 3 inches, I don't think would be a bad thing, or 4, you know. I think we can live with your judgment and the city staff judgment on that. If I would get a motion along that lines, I would ask for it.
So moved.
Second.
There you go. My motion moved, made by Commissioner Berg and seconded by Commissioner Moyer. Did you get that motion?
I did.
Thank you. All in
I-
favor? Go ahead.
I would also just like to clarify that the commission is reviewing 2 signs tonight. So if this is approval of both signs, just without, I know the focus of the discussion was on the Waukegan Road sign.
Okay, thank you for that, just to make sure everybody knew that. I don't think we had any comments to the second sign. It's the taller sign that we, so the motion's been made. I'll ask if all are in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And there are none, so that passes. Thank you very much. Nice
Thank
to see
you. Thank you very much.
Okay. We have a new petition for a certificate of appropriateness to allow construction of an addition and alteration to a residence at 900 North Green Bay Road. And I will ask if anyone has any ex parte conflict on this.
Commissioner, I would like to recuse myself at this time, for I have involvement with this project.
All right.
For my work.
Appreciate that, your excuse, and we'll see you back because we have more after this.
Beautiful, beautiful house.
And I think this is going to be presented by Diane. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana Melikar of Melikar Architects, and I'll be presenting tonight, as well as Craig Bergman, landscape architect, on behalf of Bill and Barbara Schuman. Mrs. Schuman's here tonight as well. So I wanted to give a summary first of our project goals that include the following. Make the home more suitable for family living by adding an attached garage, mudroom, and second floor guest suite. Provide an elegant land plan that is stylistically correct and integral with the home and property. Enhance the design concepts of the original home and site. This is an aerial view of the Schumann's property. The Schumann's 2.75 acre park-like property is located on a private lane. There is extensive vegetation that screens the expansive lawn surrounding the home from neighboring residences. The existing home is rectangular in footprint and presents its short side face to the driveway entry. A detached coach house in the same style as the main house is located near the street. This is the first floor plan of the home. You can see here that the plan is symmetrically organized around an elegant and spacious 2-story central cortile foyer with a grand staircase, and that's shown in blue. The central interior cortile space is further emphasized by a strong east to west axis inside the house and the site, and is expressed by the entry locations on the front and rear of the home. Here are the front and rear photos of the existing home. The existing house was designed in the formal Louis XV French style. The existing home is simple in form and massing and is adorned with high-quality materials that are consistent with the formal architectural style. The roof is mansard style, clad with slate. Walls are stucco finish with cut limestone coining, window and door surrounds, and wall base. The potential strength of the internal organizing cortile has not been fully developed on the building's exterior, and the existing front and rear facades have not been resolved. Window rhythms and wall spacings are not adequately balanced around the central door openings, compromising the elegance of the house. Compare the image of the home's existing front facade above and the proposed elevation below. Incorporating a new, wider central wall treatment and dormers corrects and balances the existing window-wall relationships and rectifies the lacking proportions of the original facade. It also correctly expresses the internal cortile's volume on the exterior facade and emphasizes the strong east-west axis that runs through the home and site. This improved facade also is a key feature in our proposed site plan. The proposed garage mudroom addition will engage with the existing kitchen on the south side of the original home. A small hyphen link separates the main body of the home with the new garage. The garage wall and roof heights, as well as window and dormer sizes, are proportionally scaled down from those on the original home. In this way, the garage mass is subordinated to the main house, which is typical of French architecture. Material selections of the addition and front and rear facade treatments will match the existing home. Here you can see an image of the existing rear facade and the proposed rear elevation for comparison. A similar wall treatment to the front facade is introduced on the rear facade. A new first floor loggia, the same width as the interior central cortile, helps to engage the existing interior space with the improved exterior living space on the terrace. The exterior flooring treatment of the terrace will extend freely into the loggia area. This image is taken near the street entry of the site. When visitors enter the property, they see the northern short side of the home and the long facade of the detached garage. This is a source of confusion, as the garage appears larger and more prominent than the home. It gives the impression that there are actually two coach houses left over from an estate home long since removed from the property. This is an existing site plan diagram. Notice the cortile at the center of the house and how it sets up an east-west axis through the house and site. The existing land plan is not unlocking the potential of the property. The home and detached garage do not relate to each other, nor does the house feel settled into its expansive site. The buildings, gardens, arbor, and landscape features sit in isolation, not relating to an overall site organization. The existing side approach driveway is in opposition to the formal front-rear axial arrangement of the home. The resultant parking pad in front of the home compromises any elegant disposition of automobiles on the site. This is an image of the proposed site plan, or I should say land plan. It is our intent to create a land plan that is integral with the house and relates to its French architectural style. All proposed site plan and architectural modifications respond to the home's central cortile, formal plan symmetry, and exterior building proportions. We propose to modify the driveway so that the visitor arrives on axis with the improved front facade and entry. This new driveway configuration eliminates the unsightly large parking pad and removes the cars that would otherwise park adjacent to the home. It also creates a tapis vert green lawn laid before the front facade. This 25-foot wide by 70-foot tapis vert and forecourt are correctly sized to the building proportions, facade treatment, and front entry. To enhance the driveway approach, the proposed design incorporates the existing 190-foot long arbor and stone statuaries that were left over from a previous site composition. The stone markers will be relocated to visually terminate the east-west axis reflected on the improved front facade and tapis vert. Now I'd like to quickly share some architectural precedents for our proposed design. The images illustrate the French formal architectural design and its integral relationship with the landscape. Here is La Lanterne at Versailles. Its tapis vert provides a welcoming carpet to the front entry door. Here's another home at Versailles. It also utilizes the tapis vert. This garden in Paris reinforces the building's symmetry. And this is an example of a well-designed loggia. The loggia creates a beautiful transition between interior and exterior space. And finally, here is an image of David Adler's pool residence in Lake Bluff. Its detailed central doorway feature is balanced by the tapis vert in front. And now I'll turn it over to Craig.
Hello, everybody. By quickly taking you through some site images as well as some precedent images, I thought that I'd just explain to you what our intentions are with the landscape. Okay? Quality landscape screening will be reestablished at the north and the east side of the property, this being north, and all along this east side. Along the south edge of the property already, there's quite an extensive, almost wild on the neighbor's property, and there's quite a number of multiplicity of trees along the west side and heavy screening all along this little lane, which they call Sunset Lane. Jennifer, we can change it. One of the things I thought would be interesting to do is to take you just on a passageway through from where the drive would start on the new proposed location and then take us all the way around to the facade of the house. So currently, the drive at the coach house looks sunken. In essence, when they put the coach house or the garage in, as Diana was calling it, by superimposing it on existing grade, a big slope had to be cut back to accommodate the floor space of the garage, and that's why you see that wall right there. We're maintaining that same sense of sunken driveway at the property entry, and if you can imagine this house up here on Green Bay Road, by this driveway being sunken, there won't ever be any kind of a nuisance for headlights or anything coming in, or vehicular traffic being seen from the neighbor to the east here or to the north up here. Views from the property west of Sunset Lane. Sunset Lane is the private lane. If one was pulling out of the driveway right now, this is the screening you can see along the old Chandler house's property along here. Mrs. Chandler's new house is tucked back behind here. With the new location of the drive cut, this is what the screening will be of the neighbors already if we were to come out onto Sunset Lane from the new proposed location. As you can see, like Diana was speaking about, the tapis verte is a classic, appropriate way of framing a piece of formal architecture. Most importantly, the driveway from Sunset Lane all the way to the front door is proposed to be gravel and porous. It will not be a blacktop driveway with gravel on top. It's actually a gravel driveway with a fancy gravel surface. So in essence, we're putting the driveway in at grade, so we're not affecting grade for existing trees, and most importantly, we're not affecting grade for water flow. Okay. As one would look with your back to the west, this would be the fence section that we see right here, and we've staked the width of the drive. Since we've met with the forester, and after these stakes were put in the ground, the forester has asked us to move this drive entry a little further south to protect the roots of this Norway maple that exists right at the property corner. So this would be this is the existing curb cut, and this would be the proposed curb cut, which is right here. Okay. As you can see, as Diana had mentioned, the driveway is parallel to the facade of the house at present, and this is if you're standing straight on looking due south, and as you're rounding the bend, this is how a visitor would approach the property. So one actually has to turn east to go south to get into the front court that we saw in the site plan. As we look at the screening that is existing right now, all of the old estate screening of these old yews and old Norway spruce and witch hazel, the density of this thicket, you can see one can't see the backyard of 900 Green Bay. What we're proposing to do is take this same character of planting and pull it all the way across the north facade of the house and fill in the void where the current driveway is right now. This is what one sees when approaching from the west, sees the Schumann property right now. As you can see, the coach house looks very much like the butt end or the north end of the house itself. It's like a baby version of the house. Our proposed plan would put in screening from 6 to 12 feet beginning in height, so that will, in essence, cover at gutter level day one of screening. These old Austrian pine and Norway spruce will remain. So in essence, all of this will be closed out permanently. So the parking pad in front of the coach house doors, the pedestrian door, all of that will be concealed from public view with the new location of the driveway. As one rounds the corner around the coach house, and we're heading south now after we pass the coach house, there is a short section of the existing arbor that's perpendicular to the long length that will need to come down. We'll save the posts for any kind of repair as well as the rafters. And you can see that there's a clear shot through this parkland, and the same view looking back is what you're seeing here. The drive would come through this area here. One of the situations that we have is that we need to clear the the northeast corner of the coach house and reorient ourselves to parallel this beautiful arbor that's existing. It's really going to be exciting to be able to traverse coming and going from this property along this arbor, because right now it's just tucked off to the edge and you can't really tell what it is when the trees are in leaf. And then one would approach the front of the house. You can see here, this is the south edge of the north drive spur. You see those two stakes. In the wintertime, it's hard to do, showing you green spaces, but this really does show you how important to maintain that green space in front of that house, because now one can see what they're coming to by seeing the large mass of the house. As we spoke about the central axis, it's a formal orientation of any home if one has a circle drive or if one has a central lawn. It's very historic to run this central axial view, and this was just one that we found right here in Lake Forest that you can truly see. In our representation, we would have the new garage here, but as you can see, it's a nice approach to a very formal setting. Interestingly, this is a 1946 aerial photograph that we found. Actually, a friend of ours who left the room found it for us. But this is the existing arbor as it laid in the original formal garden setting. The existing spruce trees, one of which is in the heritage tree that's protected from any new construction, is in this zone. And I'm sure it was to conceal the fact that the neighboring estate had greenhouses and garages down here, and this was more of a service, true vegetable garden in the southeast corner of this garden. This attachment, this is where we're proposing to run our new driveway through. It must have been an entryway to the garden from some type of a courtyard that is no longer there, and obviously this piece of ground that's here, those buildings aren't even part of this parcel anymore. The house, the old house, was much further west. Our house is presently sitting right here. So interesting to see where we inherited this from. The arbor itself is quite interesting constructed. The posts are concrete and the rafters have been replaced, but they're all cedar. But it's quite a beautiful structure. Along the east property line, this is an existing photograph from last week after the snow melted. You can see that there's virtually no vegetation anywhere except an occasional tree, and these are the posts of the arbor that one sees. And from the front door of the house looking east, here's the parking lot that exists right now, and then you can see in the distance, here's how the arbor relates in the winter landscape. The trees that you see in the foreground here, a number of them will remain. The bulk of them are actually closest to this arbor itself, and that big pine tree, just for reference, is on the east neighboring property. All of the thicket that you can see here, it's all buckthorn, box elder, a couple of green ash, and old remnant screening evergreens, and that's what you see in here. This is not the heritage Norway spruce. The great one is a little further south than that photograph. Okay. By following cues historically, much like this house is reference to the French landscape style, we're going to be very simple with the foundation planning, just simple flat top hedges, espaliered trees framing doorways. Jennifer, we can keep going. A connection between the coach house and the main house. We're proposing to put an alley of ornamental pear trees with a gravel path to give a sense of connectivity of these two structures that right now seem quite disjointed. Between the north wall of the house and the street, we spoke of screening. Interior of the screening, we're proposing an azalea and rhododendron garden. There's quite a number of flowering dogwood trees that are already planted. We're supplementing those and bringing in more azaleas as well. There's a lot of old evergreen trees. The soil drains well there, and it's a nice cultural spot to keep going what the previous owner had started. Excuse me. At the south end of the house, we actually have a grade change, which we're excited about. So We're planting turf steps and a little bit of an herb terrace here.
We have water.
In the Midwest, excuse me, we're happy for any grade change. So the turf steps have 5-inch risers, and it's very simple what we're approaching to do. And then on the west terrace, the terraces will be bluestone, not Colorado stone, but they'll be classic parterre beds planted with simpler plantings than these, but this was just a garden for precedent we want to show you. So as we were speaking to those different elements, here's the LA. Here's a garden dedicated to hydrangeas, because Mrs. Schumann loves hydrangea. With all the pieces of vegetation that you see, I thought it would be of interest for you to know that we are proposing to take some trees down in this corridor, but there are 80 remaining existing trees that are between 10 and 31-inch caliber. And we're required to replace inch for inch on the trees 206 caliper inches, and on our plan we're already replacing 239 inches. So our intention is to landscape this property beautifully and also replace the caliper inches. You know, it's not, we're not impulsively replacing trees that are coming down. We're actually putting a better landscape in and setting this beautiful house in a proper setting. There was just one other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned. And I just wanted to just have everybody understand that when we brought this to the city's attention, our goals are their goals. We're all in line to make this thing work, because it's a missed opportunity. I think what happened was the previous owner built a beautiful house and then ran out of steam. And luckily, the house has met the Schumanns, and the steam's back. So we hope we can get your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Do the staff.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I won't speak too much to the details of the plan. The presentation tonight was fairly comprehensive, and I think you can tell the thought and research that was put into the proposed design and site planning. As was mentioned, the two are really interconnected. The way that the car approaches the front of the building and the way that the design of the garages relate to that go hand in hand. With respect to the architecture, all of the details appear to meet the standards in the ordinance. There's a level of detailing that, or an opportunity, I guess, to enhance the detailing of the home. And I think the way that it's executed in these plans meet the criteria in the ordinance. I would like to provide some comments on the landscaping and site design, specifically the conditions of approval that are noted in the staff report. There are some conditions above and beyond what the standard conditions that you guys typically see with petitions. The first is regarding the relocation of the driveway. The design of the driveway is certainly based in historic precedent, but there is some modification to the site that has to occur in order for that driveway to be manipulated in this fashion. Hopefully everyone was able to visit the site, use the staking diagram, and follow the proposed driveway. And you'll see when you're out there the trees that need to come down in order to place the driveway in that location. I think the landscape plan that's proposed is very comprehensive. The areas that need particular attention, and as this plan, if determined to be appropriate by the commission, moves into the permit phase, the city's certified arborist will work carefully and closely with the petitioner to ensure that a landscape buffer is maintained along the east property line, that any holes in the landscaping along the west property line are filled to really secure the intent of the subdivision for this area. So just to back up a little bit and give some history, when these lots were developed, The intent was really, when there were 2 lots that were developed, and the intent was really to preserve and enhance the landscaping along the property lines and really provide adequate landscape buffer between structures in the area. So I think this petition presents an opportunity to really fulfill the intent of that subdivision and allow for landscape screening along the east, along the west, and then also enhancement along the private drive with the relocation of the entrance. And really, with respect to that, the views from the outside looking into this property are certainly going to be improved. You'll see more landscaping than you will structure. Some key conditions that I'd just like to highlight are, as Mr. Bergman mentioned, the location of the entrance to the driveway. The city's arborist will work closely with them to determine the best location to start that entrance point to preserve as many trees along the private drive. The private drive is actually owned by the property owner to the west, so any removals or modification in that area will need approval from the Chandlers who live in the house to the west. I did speak with Mr. Chandler today, and he is supportive of the request, but did ask that the landscape enhancement, especially to the west between his property and this property, be carefully reviewed and appropriately landscaped. Then, as we move to condition of approval number 5, which is referring to the landscape plan, I think it's important that the condition of approval that the driveway remain a pervious material that is proposed as a gravel drive, which is more of a pathway, more of a landscape feature for the house, as opposed to an asphalt driveway, is very important. I think it's important to call out that the historic trellis that's on the property be preserved and maintained, as it's integral to the way that the car drives along that east property line. Let's see. I would modify one of these conditions in the landscape plan to include the west property line. I think right now it just calls out the east property line, but let's also call out the west property line and make sure that there's a comprehensive landscape plan for the whole property. And then the final condition of approval is requesting that the commission direct staff to conduct periodic proactive inspections of the construction. Given the importance of the landscaping and the historic properties adjacent to this lot, I think it is important for us to be out there and really seeing what's going on and make sure that the landscape intent and the preservation of the significant landscaping does occur throughout the construction process. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but at this point, staff is recommending approval, and there are findings in the staff report for the architecture and the site design.
I do have some questions. Is there lighting proposed for either the entrance or the drive, or is there lighting existing?
That would be a good question for the petitioner.
Okay.
Currently, there is no landscape lighting except a couple of lights on the inner yard side of the coach house. And if you were at the property, there's a Japanese lantern that lights, and that does not belong to our client.
Okay.
That's further west.
So nothing's proposed for illumination of the driveway itself? Or
Presently, there has been nothing proposed. Okay. And honestly, we haven't spoken to the client about it.
And another question would be, I think I saw somewhere on one of these plans a note that there's a public utility easement in this location. Is that the case?
Megan, do you want to respond to that, or?
Sure. I'm not sure about a public utility easement. I'm just looking.
I want to say
at
it was
paper.
along the east portion of the property.
There is a landscape buffer that, as part of the
Oh, so that might be the line of the
subdivision,
buffer.
before there were homes built there. This home was actually built, I think, in 2001. It's a newer home. Those landscape buffers were put in place to provide assurance that the structures would be screened from each other. So the landscape plan that's proposed does provide for additional landscaping along the trellis within that landscape buffer area.
I'm quite sure I saw that earlier in the day when my eyes were better. Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? It's okay.
I mean, it's a beautiful
We don't have
plan.
to have it,
I'm pretty impressed with the architectural plan and the land design. I think when I was out there, you worry a little bit about the trees, and I think it's important that the arborist does work closely with them to try to minimize that impact, because some of them are beautiful, but I think overall this, the plan is beautiful.
Great.
You want to comment, or is that later?
Well, let's ask if there's any public comment first, and if there is some, we'll hear it. If there's not, then we can deliberate. So it looks like we're deliberating.
I think your plans are absolutely beautiful. Diana always does everything perfectly, and you do too, so I think it's wonderful. I don't think that the previous owner ran out of steam so much as he was an empty nester, and he has a house in Switzerland, and so he probably wasn't quite as concerned about privacy because he wasn't there all the time, so I think that might have been it. But thank you for bringing this. I think it's going to be beautiful.
I agree.
Sure.
Comment. I really think the plan is terrific. I think the features are just great the way they are. They have a very talented and accomplished professional team working on, so that's not a surprise. But I'll share a reaction I had that, and a suggestion for a possible investigation could be dismissed and say, no, we looked at that, or we don't agree. I would not argue with you. I say I think I'm on borderline considering something, which is this: the entry road on the north has a fluidity of form, belongs to the landscape. It's not part of the rigid geometry of the house and the architectural complex yet. And when you turn the corner to go south, it suddenly does become part of that geometry, the formal geometry. But we haven't discovered the house and its forecourt and so on yet. So it's by itself at that point. And the thought, or at least the suggestion to investigate, would be that you continue the fluidity of that form with a reverse curve and bend in and then come back out and then become formal when you actually arrive to the complex of the architecture. And part of the reason for that is that we don't have any obelisk or other visual element at the end of the straight drive, which for me would somehow, I say, justify it or make it something that seems to be a part of a larger idea. Not suggesting that there be an obelisk added or some event, because we don't want to make this an amusement park, with events all over the place. But if it did have a reason for being straight, that would be a reason, because it's directing a view towards a certain element or visual event. Now, that was a first reaction. When I then discovered the arbor, I was out there actually yesterday, but I didn't get back where the arbor is, and so the wood arbor lends support to the straight. There's a relationship there that was spoken to, and I agree, there is a relationship there. Having said that, I think if you did, look into the investigation of a reverse curve, it appears to me it would not affect the tree picture at all. Namely, it would not lose any other trees than the one that is in the middle of the road right now. It would still be in the middle of a road. But it was just, because, by the way, I also was very impressed by the landscape form at the west side of the site. That kind of fluidity of form is just gorgeous, beautiful. And the entry drive, as you come in, shares in that kind of composition. The thought was just to continue a bit until you actually arrive to where the formal architecture is, and that point becomes straight. That's all. And again, as I say, this is not a condition. I withhold my support unless you do that, not at all. I think you could do exactly what you're doing right now, and it's going to be wonderful.
It's an interesting comment, Fred. There's a couple challenges because the grade is, that's where the wall is too. So there's you'd have to push that wall further east as well. And I think one of the other sensitivities that I can respect in the petition is the trying to minimize the impact to this eastern landscaped edge. But I like the comment. It's
Actually, I don't think you need to move the wall or anything about that road. You just continue the curvature instead of straightening out. Keep coming back in, in a very subtle way.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And then curving back out to become, just a bit of a reverse curve. That's all.
What do you think of that plan? What do you think of Mr. Moyer's thought? Or is that a bad one?
Certainly would look at it and consider,
I think it makes
appreciate
this.
input, so.
And I think one of the things that's so important
It's on
Thank
te-
you. Appreciate
it's
that.
on television.
I think one of the things that's so important is that this is a piece of paper. And in reality, when we start staking things out and truly start seeing what the future drive, how it responds to the land, often I take a straight edge and soften it. Because like you say, it doesn't have to be that much, and it might be just enough to be 18 inches away from a tree that we're respecting, and those types of things happen. And I appreciate your sensitivity to it, because a lot of people don't have it.
No, I agree with you, what you just said, but I also think, 18 inches would not.
No, I understand what
It
you're
would be
saying.
something like a 5 or 6.
Okay, I
a 5 or
understand
6
you're
foot.
you're
A little
wanting-
bit's more
you're
than
wanting
18
that.
It might look like a mistake, 18 inches, they were trying to make this straight, and they didn't quite get it.
Our trick is to clear the east wall of the coach house and have enough space to buffer so one's not
Exactly.
driving along it. And that's the trick. So
I
it's a
agree.
matter of if we can fit plants and bend at the same
I
time.
agree.
Well, it looks like an exciting change to the property, so we're pleased to see it. Any other comments or deliberations? If not, I'll ask for a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion that we grant a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed attached garage addition and alterations with the site modifications subject to the conditions of approval. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 by the staff.
And we're going to add to that one additional wording about the west property line, right?
Right, and you may also wish to consider an additional condition regarding lighting, that if any lighting is proposed, that come back to the commission.
Well, the lighting's not included in the request, so I would expect that it would have to, or not.
Not, you can certainly, if you want to see the lighting plan, then I would put it in the conditions.
Okay, so if there is any change to the lighting, we would ask for that to come back.
Okay?
So with those additions, so moved by Commissioner McTier,
Seconded?
seconded by Commissioner Preslak. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No, any opposed? And that one passes.
Whatever you do will
Congratulations.
be
Thank you.
beautiful.
It's beautifully done.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. How can you
Double
find
wow.
fault with any of
Thank you.
it? Perfect. Easy night.
Jim, could you
Pleasure.
run downstairs and see if Guy is still there? Our next agenda item is the demolition of a pool and pool house at 902 North Green Bay Road. If you give us 1 minute, I think we need to get one commissioner back. Thank you. Were you watching?
I was eating and then I was playing around with my stuff.
Thank you, go ahead. Yeah. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good evening. My name is Roger Chancellor. I'm with Marvin Herman and Associates, and this is at least our second or third time in front of you for this project. What we're asking this evening is for the approval to remove the existing pool house and pool. We've had Susan Benjamin provide us with the history of the site and of the building. We do meet the standards for demolition, as noted in the summary of petition at the end here. Findings in support of demolition of pool house. I won't go through all of that, but what we would like to present is Although we're not ones to just want to go in and tear something down. In this case, we have a pool house and a swimming pool that's in a front yard, visible from the front of the house. Also, it is completely surrounded by vegetation, and even driving down the street or driving onto the property, you may not even know that building is there until you actually walk up to the swimming pool. Or in this particular photograph, this is in a garden to the south of the house, and not until you really get right on this axis do you even notice that the building is there. So that was another reason that we feel removal of this particular building will not be detrimental to the fabric of the neighborhood. Another item that we would like to point out is that although the new formalist design is, this is not a significant building in that design. It's not one of Colburn's significant buildings, and because of that, we feel that taking it down is not going to be detrimental to the, I guess, the historic fabric. Technically, the house was done in 62 or 63, so it doesn't even fit the definition of historic. So that adds to our request. Visible front yard setback. Okay. And the fact that the main house is a Georgian house, and this is new formalist, and there's really no correlation between the two whatsoever, is another reason that the owners would like to have this removed. They're also wanting to put a pool in the backyard where the pool should be, and having this building in the front yard or the swimming pool in the front yard is kind of, or having two swimming pools would kind of be strange. So we do have a, as you've received the landscape plan by Mr. Stick of what he plans to do with this area, basically put it back to what I believe he felt was the original concept for the landscaping in this area, and that's pretty much our request. So I'll open it up to questions.
Okay. And Megan, you have a staff report first?
Thank you, Chairman Pairitz. Just a little background on this petition. Last summer, I believe, the Commission granted a Certificate of Appropriateness for the main house for the demolition of non-historic additions and reconstruction of a garage wing. At that time, the petition really focused on preservation of the main house and bringing the design of the additions and expansion to that house back to an appropriate massing and style for the historic home. At that time, the demolition of the pool house, pool, and wall were discussed briefly. The Commission at that time really didn't have enough information to make a judgment and take action on that request. So since that meeting, the construction is underway on the main house. The petitioner has received input from a historic consultant, provided a report to the Commission, which was included in your packets this evening. And they really have provided enough information in order to present findings on the demolition of these structures. It's true that the structures are architecturally unique. They were designed by I.W. Colburn, who's a noted architect in Lake Forest. I think, as is discussed in the report, the new formalist design of these structures is not necessarily compatible with the architecture of the main house. And I think, given the extensive efforts to preserve that architecture for the main house, demolition of these pieces is not contrary to the intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. At the beginning of these discussions, staff did have conversations with the petitioner about relocating the structures in order to support a new pool in a different location. But it was discussed at that time that no structures are actually desired by the homeowner for the pool, to support the pool. And given the architectural design and condition of the pool houses today, it may be very difficult to do that anyway. So I think with respect to the demolition, staff did present positive findings in the staff report, and they really focus on the quality and significance of the main home, which was identified in the original nomination for the Green Bay Road Historic District as significant and contributing to the district. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. In my conversation with Mr. Chandler this morning, he did express support, I guess, for or no opposition to the demolition of the pool or pool house that's being requested tonight. He was concerned that the proposed location in the rear of the lot may have some impact on his property and neighboring homes. So I would suggest as a condition of approval, in addition to the two that are listed in your staff report, that the review of the new pool on this property do come back to the commission for consideration.
Yeah, I guess that was my question, Megan. You know, in subsequent, or in previous deliberations at the council, we've had to approve plans for new structures contingent upon the demolition. I was just wondering and curious if that is also relevant for pools versus homes.
No, I see what your point. And when you're reviewing the demolition of a single-family home, the code does require that the plans for the new construction be reviewed at the same time. In this case, it's an accessory structure, and there's no replacement accessory structure proposed for the pool house, although there is a replacement pool planned in the future. That plan has not been developed fully, to my understanding. But the condition would be that when that plan is developed, that it would come forward for consideration.
And can you just help us, if we would not put that condition in, would an accessory structure automatically come back before us in any case?
Yes, a pool house, an accessory structure would certainly come back to the commission.
Right. How about a swimming pool?
I think in the past swimming pools are not required by the ordinance to come before the commission.
Okay. Other questions?
No, but we all do know that Ike Holborn was the Hafter's son-in-law, and that's why it has no bearing on the beautiful architecture of the house. It's just because it was their son-in-law.
Is that a question?
No. Sorry.
All right. Is there, do you want to have public comment
Do we all
first, or do you
know?
want a question? Because I would let you have a question later, or a
I'll have
comment
a
later.
question maybe later. I think I'm okay.
You want a question now? Is there any public comment on this? Thank you, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm Pauline Moore. My address is 2000 Knollwood Road in Lake Forest, and I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. I'm not here to object to the demolition, but I would like to provide some different perspectives than what has been presented thus far on preservation issues that relate to this structure as well as in general preservation. In the North Green Bay Road Historic District, nomination was prepared by the foundation. We began in 1990, and we started out by mapping the district, which is covers quite a bit of territory. Then we cataloged all of the structures within that district. And finally, that it really took, because we were all volunteers in the beginning, it took us 5 years to get the designation. The final work on it was we hired a professional to do the polishing, do some writing, and to accompany us to the, where it was presented to the state agency. So that's the background. That designation was granted on 2 criteria. and we haven't talked about one of those. The first criteria was the architectural excellence of the structures within the district, and the second criteria was the social history within the district. When we finally finished the nomination, there were 153 structures that were considered contributing, and 129 that were non-contributing. But what you must understand about non-contributing structures within a district, oftentimes that relates to the fact that they aren't 50 years old. When the East Lake Forest District was proposed and accepted and received the nomination, the Kersey Coates Reed House did not qualify because it wasn't 50 years old. The Stride family later wrote an individual nomination for that, and it went on the National Register. Right now, the city is relooking at the East Side District and picking up those structures that were considered non-contributing but really do contribute. Now they're 50 years old. Anyway, that's that background. As far as the social history is concerned, you know, of course, I think this is all in your packet, that it was the Donnelly's home, and it remained in the Donnelly family, I believe, until this, I think this family bought the home from the Chandlers. Mrs. Chandler was Hafner. She was a granddaughter of the Donnellys, and her sister was Franny Colburn. And that was, as someone on the, Jenny Munson-McTier pointed out, was brother-in-law of Clarissa. So that explains it. But now, my last point is on additions and accessory structures on historic properties and their compatibility. And there's a lot of controversy and disagreement among preservation people or preservationists about what that compatibility should be. On one side are those people who think that it should be, okay, this was colonial revival, the pool house should echo that architecture, and the materials should be very similar, or if possible, the same as in the historic structure. On the other side of the argument is, no, there should be a difference, because when preservation isn't about what we like or, you know, we enjoy it, it's about history. And when someone looks at this house, they should be able to distinguish what was the original design of the house and what has been changed, what has been added to it. Now, you know, most of us would not be able to make that distinction, but experts in preservation do see those differences, and they can pick out, you know, what the original historic fabric was. So, to me, this is a little bit of a dilemma. Colburn was a nationally noted architect. He has many projects in Lake Forest, and to say this wasn't his best, it isn't on the scale of the McLennan House, well, it's a pool house. You wouldn't want it on the scale, you know, of a major home. So I think you have a difficult, I'm glad I don't have to make the decision, because I'm torn one way to really preserve this and to say, you know, at what point in history should we go back? It'll be 50 years old next year. And on the other hand, to respect the wishes of the homeowners, which I think that's a very important point. And I don't know that they're restoring the landscape. What they are doing, unless I'm wrong about this and you have more information in your packet, they're going back to kind of the original feel of what they think was there, and maybe they do have some documentation. But anyway, I think it's a difficult problem to think about, and I think that important preservation issues come to play, and I'm just glad I'm not sitting in one of your seats to make that decision.
Thank you. Other public comments?
evening. My name is Rami Lopat. I live at 410 East Woodland Road. I am honored to say that I share a seat at the Board of Directors of Lake Forest Preservation Foundation with Pauline Moore. She's so eloquent. I don't have a comment per se on whether you should allow a demolition of this building or not, but I do have a comment about your staff recommendation here. It's small, but I think it's significant. Number one, to provide comprehensive digital photographic documentation. I would like to ask that those photos do more than adequately document the site. I would like to ask that they document the building and the site. I happen to live in a house at 410 East Woodland that does have a Coburn addition on it. We didn't discover that until we were well involved in remodeling our home. And I wish I had been able to go to the city files and see what that original building had looked like. We have discovered since, for example, that Coburn's architecture is very distinguished by the mortar joints that he used. You can go up to a building and go, that's how I would have done it. But we had nothing to work at. It had been significantly changed. And I would like very much to have to know that the architectural record is intact for someone coming along, a researcher perhaps on Coburn's work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? And I don't see any, so now it's time for deliberations. And I guess I have to say I agree with the first public comment. I'm sorry I didn't remember. Mrs. Moore. I think it's harder than it looks on the surface for this one because it's really a modest structure, and that plays against its ability to stand the test of time just because it is specifically designed around a specific purpose that has gone away and probably will go away. And it's unfortunate siting for this house, but it's a cool little building. And it's a completely intact relic. It's not something that's been pushed around by an addition or a change or something in the past. It's there. It works. It's what it was, and it was interesting to go through. I kept finding myself walking around it trying to understand if there was an alternative kind of way that could be useful on the property for tennis courts or something else, I don't know what, grilling area, I don't know, But, I do think it's an unfortunate place for a pool on that property, and I wouldn't have any problem with the removal of the maintenance building on the other side of the pool or the pool itself. But you hate to cast away something that's just, a fairly iconic kind of little example of someone's work. So that's my reaction to it. I'm curious that we don't have a landscape plan submitted for what would go here, and I know it's different set of rules for residential building versus something else, but we saw quite a exquisite landscaped plan for the last petition, showing us what we would be looking at if we allowed a change. And here, I think might be worth considering a little more in depth what would be built here, and frankly, if there was any way that this could be incorporated into it before we just take it down. But I guess those are my comments. I don't know if anybody else has comments.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of torn, or I didn't really understand clearly how we should think about it, given that it's an adjacent structure and a pool, and I didn't see the plan for what was going to replace it, or the new pool. And given the neighbors' concerns potentially of the new pool in the back of the home, it'd be nice to just think of this petition more holistically, I think, before we just say, let's knock it down. I kind of feel like we wouldn't be going through the proper deliberation.
I do think there's a couple comments that might be in order too, for just with respect to the rationale behind removal, and whether a building is 50 years old or not, I don't think is a particularly good rationale. Sooner or later, they'll all be 50 years old if we let them. And whether it's a good example of a style or whether the style was particularly successful or not, maybe the first is more important than the second because the style might come back. So also the fact that it's not particularly visible from the public, it's not used by the public, it's not the public's building. Also, I don't give that a lot of merit either. The building was there when the home was purchased. It's part of the fabric of the community, whether we can use it or not. However, it is quite a modest structure, and it could be easily duplicated and replaced if someone wanted to do that. No one would ever probably want to do that. So, actually, I'm curious if the petitioner would be put off if this were continued for a month. And the reason I ask that question is not so much because I'm not a fan of taking it down, but if I'm going to take down or allow a building to be taken down, I wouldn't mind a little more time to consider that, and I'm curious if that's a problem for the petitioner.
Should I respond?
Yes, please.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
I wish that I had submitted our landscape plan.
Yeah.
And I will have that.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, unless there's unless there's an objection from any of the other commissioners, my recommendation or my suggestion would be to table it for, and so that we can think about it a little more and have the opportunity, the luxury of a little more time in this kind of conversation. And also, if there's more information with respect to what might be built here landscape-wise. And also, I do think that we would be interested to understand what at least was the thought for the future of any pool or any pool structure. And if that's not fully developed, that's okay, I think.
I think it is.
Okay.
You did get this landscape plan. If you need more than that,
Yeah.
let me know, but that is the
Yeah.
final landscape.
I don't think we did get that, did we?
Mr. Chairman, there,
It is?
Here, it's the landscape plan. Here it is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Description from the landscape architect who's from Virginia, so it's hard for him to get here. In the
We have
packet
this
for
actually.
evening.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it in the presentation, so I didn't focus on it.
Chairman Pairitz?
Yeah.
If I may, one suggestion could be to direct them to enhance this and really look at the landscaping that they're proposing. If you are leaning towards continuing the petition, it would be helpful to have direction as to whether or not this is sufficient or needs to be enhanced.
I see. Can you give us 1 minute to just digest this? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, on this plan, the old pool house is that, where is that? I mean, I know you're not going to, do not wish to have it.
I will
Where-
try to describe where it is.
But where
If you
is
come
it?
off of the main
Replacement?
house,
Pardon me?
if you come off of the main house
Yes,
towards the bottom of the page,
yes.
there is a, well, here, let's try this.
I know this house pretty well. I
Okay.
played, swim in the pool and
Pool house.
played tennis there with it.
Here is, right here.
Okay,
You can see that.
okay. Thank you. Did you see that, Guy? Did you all see what he just pointed out, where the pool house was when you were talking? I think he was. Can you show Mr. Pairitz
Just
again?
point to it one more time. I believe I do know where it is.
It's right here.
That's what I thought,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
The pool is here, and the other building is right here.
Is it basically an issue that without the pool, the current pool pavilion just doesn't seem to have a raison d'etre? I mean, it's, right now, I know when I visit that, I go in, I see the dome over it, and I go in through those triple arches, and it's a little cramped in there. And then I wonder what's behind those doors, and I open it, and there's kind of a worn-out kitchenette.
Right.
And those things. And I guess that the outside promise of something maybe a little more elegant is kind of like taken away by that. And I'm just wondering if you don't have a pool there anymore, and you don't really need changing rooms, you don't need a lot of those various things, I'm wondering if maybe, and I'm not saying you have to do this, I'm just thinking creatively here, and I happen to know, are you the young lady that, Kurt, I think this is the homeowner, isn't it?
Yep.
You met?
I believe so.
Stephanie here.
About
Stephanie?
Yes,
Yes.
we've met before. Hi, Stephanie
Hi,
Harris.
Stephanie. Yes, I see better now. You are. How are you?
Good.
Everything's looking marvelous over there. We're very excited about what you're doing, and we think
Thank
it's
you.
fantastic. So we're just trying to help
And
you
the
out.
comments were very, very helpful from the other meetings that we've had, actually. Now that I see it come together, they were very, very helpful.
And,
So
and
thank
she's
you.
speaking about the subcommittee comments, just for the other commissioners to understand. We had a subcommittee with regard to that petition, that if you have it, serve on that in the future, they can be very resourceful and productive. And it was, see how happy she is? It's always.
Yeah, well, now that I see it
very-
come together, I think, oh, if the roof had been taller, we would really have a problem. So.
Yeah. Go ahead with regard to the usage of it now without the pool. If you
Well, I
have
can
any
tell you
comment.
what we were thinking when we came to this conclusion, because we had the same thought. When we first saw the building, it looked very unique and whatnot, and at further exploration, it just didn't seem to do anything. You know, you open things and there were all these giant bugs everywhere, and you open these big doors and it's about this deep in there, and you're not really sure why or what. It just didn't make any sense. And when I walked around with the Chandlers, they said, "Oh, you didn't really know what to do with this," and whatever. And we didn't want to deal with the pool. And here's the pool, and the pool is, wouldn't be entirely need to be dug out, redone. It is completely, it's a death trap the way it is now. There wasn't really a lot of, Mrs. Chandler was giving me suggestions on to what to do with the house, and she really didn't have a whole lot of love for this area. And right now there is a tennis court in the back where we were proposing to move the pool. So I can't tell you for sure, but I believe the footprint of the pool will actually be smaller than the current footprint of the tennis court. And I believe we are also adding more screening there, as well as there's an existing berm the Chandlers put in before they moved, because they didn't want to see their old house from their new house anyway. So I believe that we are adding to that. I don't have the specific number of trees. So the idea really was to really sort of get rid of the footprint of the tennis court, put the pool back there where it's not right in the front of the house. And with the amount of, really the condition that the front pool was in, and where it was sort of locked away in this very secret garden, the only way you can really see that pool and the house is either from the corner of the living room of the house, or if you actually walk in the gate. Even if you're standing in the front yard of the house, you can't see it. I know that really makes no difference. The structure is there, and it is what it is. But when we first saw it, when we first saw the house the first number of times, we didn't know it was there. It was only about the third or fourth time that we walked through, and they said, "Well, did we show you the pool?" And all of a sudden, you go into this area. So what we want to maintain is the integrity of this sort of secret area, because the way the landscape has been laid out at this house, and as you'll see, if you took an aerial photo of what it looks like today and an aerial photo of what it's going to look like after we're done, they'd basically look exactly the same. The garden's going to stay where it is. The design of the garden is going to stay. We're going to try to sort of renovate it, but it will be what it is. There's a garden off the south end of the house that we are going to try to restore to exactly what it was. There's a sort of
Is that the sunken garden with the trellis?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to try.
that's-
Mrs. Chandler has photos, so we do actually have photos of what the original property looked like.
Yeah, I think that was part of Shaw's site layout for the house. I think he did he was,
That I can't talk to, but I do know the Chandlers did have the original photos, and that's what we sent to the landscape architect to work from. And so the integrity of all the landscaping should essentially remain the same. It has been changed a great deal. There used to be a U-shaped driveway in front. There's one existing elm from that driveway, so it's a lot of it has been changed. But what we can restore, we're going to try to restore. The piece that this pool sort of, so what I'm getting at is that the way that property is laid out is there are a lot of sort of secret garden areas. And what we want to maintain in the front is that sense of a secret garden. So that, as you'll see, if the pool were to come out and these structures were to come out, the trees will remain. There's a sunken garden just to the west of where the pool is. That will remain. The staircase will remain. So the integrity of the way the land was originally laid out, or so we were told by the Chandlers, who I think would know. They know a lot about this house. Will remain the same. There won't be any grade change. There would be more screening added there because we are aware of the new owners at 900, and because we're not sure what they're going to do, although it looks really beautiful. I was very thrilled. We think that some more trees in there would be good. But we like the idea that you will still be able to walk this property and get a sense of these secret areas that were originally part of the landscape. And I believe they were there before the pool was ever put in.
Did you have any luck finding any old diagrams of the site from the early part of the century?
You know, I went through the Chandler's house with them, and I know Mrs. Chandler has a lot of things.
You didn't
but
find
no.
anything? You know, I might be able to give you something
That
that
would
I
be
found
great.
from about 1919. It's not exact, it's a diagram, but it might help with you with the secret room idea.
I would love that.
Because I kind of think that there might have been that going on there. It's not an absolute diagram. I mean, it's set in, you know, stone. And then there's a gentleman in town that owns the Howard Van Doren Shaw House of the Four Winds, Bill Redmond, and he restored what was covered over a sunken Shaw garden, and it's truly spectacular. And he's a great fellow, and he's involved with the Preservation Foundation. I think Pauline could tell you how to get a hold of him, and he would love to show you his.
I would love that. Because we are trying to bring that, I mean, the garden off the south end of the house was so, it's still beautiful.
Yeah, and I know, I've been on that house many times.
But she
and-
even has, she saved me the toe from the statue of Diana so we can replace all of that. I mean,
She had an old chair in the basement that Shaw designed too, like a
no,
Letch's
it's
chair.
gone.
Is
We
it
didn't
gone
get
now?
the chair.
Anyway, I'll give you this,
But great.
but my other thought about this building, since we're deliberating on it, and I'll try to kind of speed this up a little bit, but, you know, it might be that if you're not gonna have the swimming pool there, that's what it was supposed to be, right, a swimming
Yes.
pool.
Yes.
It might have been that there was a water feature back in there, and it wasn't more than 3 feet deep, and you had lilies in it, and there goes and ties into your secret garden thing.
I would love to have that.
Yeah, and I
If
think-
you have that on the thing, just
Yeah,
let me know,
I
because I
think
would
you
love to
might
see
be
it.
interested in seeing this, and so you can use that. And it might be, though, that this pavilion, if you rethought it in terms of maybe remodeling it, and then all that paraphernalia that sort of chews up that interior space was removed, and you could turn it into something that you could actually have repose in, and unless that doesn't appeal to you. But
Well, we thought about that,
Yeah.
and you've been to the structure. And
Yes.
the problem with the structure is, if it's not a pool house, is the way it's laid out. You know, the closets are about that deep. So you open these huge doors and you have about that much room. And you've got these very small rooms that are enclosed. So if you were using it sort of as a walking space, because one of the things that we thought when we thought about the landscape was, if there are all these secret rooms, then in theory you were meant to walk the property in a certain way. And this building actually, and I'm not the expert, this was just from the discussions that we had, so I may be getting this very wrong, breaks that up in such a way that it's not part of this flow. You know, you're actually walking through a structure that really has no more meaning once the pool's not there. If it were more open, if it were the kind of thing where you could sit in there and look out at the views of the secret gardens and whatnot, but that's not the way it's built right now.
Do you have any photos of the original playhouse designed by Shaw?
No, no. We looked through everything. They had more photos than I thought they would have, so that was wonderful and very helpful. But no, we don't have that. In fact, I'm looking right now for more photos of the landscape. So anything you have.
If I may, it sounds like there's been some really good comments and some good dialogue, and it probably would be appropriate for the commission to continue this discussion and allow staff to work with the owner and look at the historic photographs, think about the proposed location of the new pool, think about any creative ways to adaptively reuse the structure, manipulate it in some way, whether it's in that location or another location, and then really bring back to the commission a comprehensive packet that really describes the intent of the landscaping, the new pool, and more justification behind the decisions that are being asked of you.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Did you have a comment? I think Fred-
Yes, just speaking to the issue of demolition or not demolition of the existing pool structure, just reflecting that if there had been a historic preservation ordinance 50 years ago in Lake Forest, and there had been a historic preservation commission 50 years ago, and this pool house came before it for a certificate of appropriateness, in my opinion, it would not have been given a certificate of appropriateness, it would not have been built. So I have no problem with it going away.
And one more comment on that really quick is that there were various things I think that were done with the house or inside the house that I think might have been done by the same architect.
Yes, we
That-
do know that Ike Coburn went through the whole house.
Because I know I was in the house once, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, and I know you pass through the house, the historic part, the older home, and then all of a sudden you're turning the doorknob of an office building, hardware, and a completely glass door to, it's so incongruous then, and it was sort of a heavy-handed approach to remodeling the house that was, you know, I know you can express yourself with a single structure, and that's what we're talking about here, but I'm just wondering if the sensibility was more my way or the highway with Mr. Colburn at this particular juncture on this property. Because, I mean, what he did inside the house was with no finesse at all for blending. It was going to be obviously different, you know. So, I mean, I'm just talking to what Fred is saying, so one could take that, we allowed that to happen now? Probably not, you know.
You did allow us to take off Colburn's porch and the library addition off of the main house.
Yeah. I was wondering too, and that was my question that I didn't ask before, is that there was a sleeping porch and a porch, two-story porch on the south end of this house.
Yes, there was.
And I was wondering, when did that come off? Did General Hafner take that off too?
Mrs. Chandler said her father took it off.
Yeah,
and
so
she
that
was
would have
very
been
sad
probably
about that.
done maybe in conjunction with this construction of the pool house and the change. In fact, I think General Hafner also put the single driveway down the middle.
Yes.
And it had a very elegant circuit, he created this beautiful mall of green like Market Square, and he, I guess, wanted to get the front door quicker, so he just slashed the road into the middle, you know.
Someday we may try to restore that too,
Yeah,
but
well,
not
this
today.
diagram shows that on there too
If
for you.
you look at the existing, or the plan on the back of the pink covered.
You have to get to the microphone.
There's a row of trees to the north of the driveway, which is where the old driveway used to be, and the curbs are actually still in the grass.
Yes, you can still see the
You
curves.
can still see them.
Yeah, I got a photograph showing that curve for you too, a little bit of it, so you can take a look.
Right.
Well, appreciate the added input, and I'm sorry that I missed this landscape plan. Actually, it was at the very end of Susan Benjamin's report. I perhaps was asleep by the time I got there, but my mistake. I do think this would benefit from, a little more deliberation, and I think all of the points are great, and it may be that this is not an appropriate structure for this assemblage of structures, but the luxury of a little more time can't hurt us on that. So if I have a motion to continue this, I would entertain that. Do I even need a motion? Thank you, I do.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to continue this until the petitioner feels they're ready to come back for us to see it again and give them the opportunity to deliberate a little more on it and maybe incorporate some of our ideas for what they're worth. And look forward to seeing you again. And again, we're all really excited about what you're doing to the house. You guys are real heroes in our community. We need people like you to keep these big old estate homes intact. I mean, they're just elegant vignettes that, you can't afford to build anymore, and I know you have a lot of time and money invested in already, and we are all really behind you.
So moved by Commissioner Berg, and I look forward to the motion rewritten by, can I get a second? Second by Commissioner Moyer, all in favor? Aye. So we'll continue that to the next time we see it. I'm sorry?
Do you have copies that I can take? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other items, Kathy, or no? I think we have no other items for this evening.
When's our meeting next month? Is it changed from the regular date?
The fourth Wednesday.
It's not, it's on the, I think it's the 23rd, it's the Wednesday.
That isn't spring break for the schools.
That was on the consent agenda.
We will check. Seems like spring breaks are all over the place. We will have someone do a poll in the next week to find out who's going to be available and who will be gone.
If it happens to be spring break, I know I'm not going to be here.
Okay.
That's the only reason I'm bringing it up.
Okay, we'll check. I don't remember.
All right, this is an opportunity if there's any other comments from the public. And seeing none, and no other information from the staff, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Berg, seconded by Commissioner McTier. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Good night.